Yeah, the cleverest thing that the European project, if we can call it that, as it's called widely in Europe, this building up over 50 more plus years of a supranational government up there, with all the member states ever increasing in numbers, the cleverest thing they did was to constantly increase the powers of this new central entity, taking them away from the nation states and their parliaments and their democracies and their voters, but at the same time leaving all the member states' own institutions, monarchies, courts, parliaments, in place. This is one of the key reasons why people haven't really understood the profundity of the process that's been going on. It's a thing I've often called the slow-motion coup d'etat, sucking away the power of national governments and therefore their electorates to give them to this very amorphous, totally how many people actually understand the European Union? How many people in this room? How many people around this table?
My point exactly, because governments have completely failed to get out and explain what the European Union is about. Did you read the very first treaty, the Coal and Steel Treaty, back in the 1950s? It was an ever closer union of peoples. It was the first step towards a federal Europe.
And
the question is, what does federation mean?
When Monsieur Monet,
yes,
who was the true father of this whole thing,
yes,
when he came before the Assembly, which was the little parliament of that Coal and Steel Community. Do you remember what his first words were?
No, I don't remember.
He said, "Welcome, gentlemen," they were all gentlemen in those days, "welcome, gentlemen, to the government of Europe."
OK, let's take a couple of points from the audience. We had somebody up there with their hand. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I've heard the panel use the word democracy, and I've also heard the word legitimacy. What sort of democracy would be acceptable to them to make a proper legitimate EU? For instance, would they have directly elected commissioners? Would they have directly elected presidents, as seems to be implied by the more extreme member of the panel?
Answer that point to start off. No,
personally, sorry.
Tony, I mean, whoever is the new president of the council is not going to be elected by anyone. He's going to be chosen by the leaders, effectively, of France and Germany, really. Is that acceptable?
Well, I personally believe, I rather agree with Robert, that it's actually a chairman of the council. The key issue, to my mind, is the president of the commission. And I would like to see that directly elected. I think that's very important. I think the Parliament's doing a great work in terms of scrutiny. But I would like the big debates that we have. You know, should Europe be on the left of centre or on the right of centre? Liberalising the economy, more of a social dimension, being argued out by the people in elections directly. And I would like to see that far stronger.
Elect the President of the Commission, Nigel Farage?
What they could have done...
Would you be a candidate for the job?
Well, I wouldn't mind having a run at it myself, I must say. You know...
It'd be quite a short tenure.
Well, we'd soon sort things out, you know.
Would you support the election of the President of the Commission, or would that go away from this EU monster you're trying to portray?
Can I answer that in a slightly roundabout way by saying this? With this constitutional treaty, and the whole process started 8 years ago and it's just come to fruition, what they could have done, the people behind the European project, is they could have democratised the whole thing. They could have made a European government that came out of the elected European Parliament. They could have turned the civil service back into what it should have been, the Commission rather, back into the civil service that it should have been. They could in fact have democratised the whole thing. If they packaged that up and then tried to sell it to the peoples of Europe in referendums, they might have done it and they might have won. But to even think they'd have done that is to misunderstand the European project and to misunderstand the people behind it. I mean, Christopher's written about this in the past. I won't take all his lines on this, but basically the whole thing was set up by bureaucrats for bureaucrats. They view democracy, and especially national democracy, as being inconvenient. This will not be democratised. That vote won't happen.
You say this is nonsense, Peter Luff, but the fact is the EU is a largely undemocratic institution. The only democratically elected part of the EU is also the Parliament, is also the least powerful.
It is an evolving institution. It's gone from 6 to 12 to 15, now 27. It can't do it all at once. There is an attempt, I believe, from the people from the very beginning to have actually brought in the people. You've listened to Churchill's speeches when the European movement was formed, talking about the potential of the United States of Europe, bringing people together in that great experiment to get rid of war in Europe. And that has been a phenomenal success.
Just to check on the fact. Do you think Churchill foresaw that Britain Britain would be part of...
No, because in those days we had an empire and Churchill was still in love with the empire.
Yep.
But he did say
right.
he did want to see a United States of Europe on the continent and us have a relationship with it.
Okay.
The question
if it's
is
as
now,
dreadful
let's
as you
be
make out,
godfathers to it.
if it's as dreadful as you make out, why is there a string of other countries wanting to join it? Why is it a model being copied in other parts of the world? You know, there's no country, apart from Nigel and his colleagues, there's nobody seriously advocating wanting to leave the European Union.
This is about politicians. Politicians, look, the Swiss have said no to this 3 times, and yet the Swiss politicians want to join the European Union.
Norwegians
the Norwegians
twice.
have said no twice, but Norwegian politicians want it. Now, are you getting a feeling for this? Okay. Politicians like it. It's good for them.
All right, come back. No, let me come back.
No, I'm not. I'm a businessman who's come into politics because the traditional parties were not giving these people a chance to express an opinion.
Okay, I'm going to come back to the questioner, the man who asked the question originally, and then the man who asked the second question. What's your view, sir, after all you've heard? The man who asked the first question initially, that's Anthony Rock.
I was actually very interested in your answers, and the first thing I thought, based on the perception that I have, is all from media, and I would say that it is like the United States. You have a lot of people coming together, and it does seem like there's a president and there's one person, and I'm not sure if people will have a voice.
Okay.
And it may be just a bureaucracy that we just watch. You just watch the game.
That's interesting, but to that I would also say, in America, and I don't know if you're American or not, but in America, the individual states have a huge amount of autonomy. Individual states can, regrettably, decide that they want to have capital punishment. Individual states have different speed limits, different laws on a whole range of different things. So the president has a lot of powers, of course he does in America, but individual states also have lots of powers. So the idea, the parallel...
Regrettably was a wonderful word you used there, regrettably. So you don't like the idea that the member states should have their own ability to do things. Is that what you're saying?
No, it wasn't. Regrettably like capital punishment.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I misunderstood.
You knew exactly what I meant.
Before we go down that little,
try to distort
let's ask the chap who asked the second question what he thinks of the answers he's heard. Yeah, please.
Well, I was getting at direct democracy, and I did ask whether, in the long run, the EU could go towards having directly elected commissioners, and perhaps not having one president directly elected as in the United States because of the language and the different cultural problems, but having a group of people in a directorate that would be directly elected by all the people of Europe. Would that be acceptable to the panel?
Okay, all right, let's move on to another question. This one's from Aline Rahim. Aline Rahim, your question.
Does anti-EU rhetoric means nationalism or common sense?
Does anti-EU rhetoric derive mostly from nationalism or from common sense? Now, are the two necessarily opposed? I don't know. That's a question that we'll ask our panellist, Robert Evans.
I didn't actually get the question, I'm sorry.
Does anti-EU rhetoric derive mostly from nationalism or from common sense?
I think, sadly, the anti-European rhetoric, with obvious exceptions of people gathered around this table, is from people who haven't been, not haven't understood, but haven't been given the raw materials to understand in the first place. Sadly, and I've done this, I've done lots of surveys of stopping people in the street to ask them questions. You know, most people don't know there's 27 countries in the European Union. People will lose all sorts of different words, the common market, the European Union, the Commission, and the vast majority in this people in this country have not been given the raw materials to fully understand where they are to start with.
Is that an admission that you're losing the argument, though?
No, it's not losing the argument. It's unfortunately the media, the press, and programmes like this are not on mainstream television yet. I'm sure they will be as a result of this evening's debate. But people aren't fully informed. They get a lot of, you know, what I would call Nigel's mumbo jumbo, and they don't get proper responses from some of the other political parties.
You're saying
we're guilty. We're all guilty on that. Yeah.
Are you saying? Let me get this. Are you saying that people who don't agree with you don't agree with you because they're ignorant?
No, I've not said that at all. No, I respect people who have a fundamental disagreement with you. I actually respect Nigel's position because he's honest about it. He's quite clear where he is about it. The British Conservative Party are fundamentally dishonest because they don't know where they are. They have very wide differences of opinion. Cameron doesn't know what he's doing with his decisions on where they're going to go should they win the next election. At least UKIP is honest about its position. I disagree fundamentally with the points. But I think most people in this country need more information. You know, and the same goes back to the argument when whether or not to join the euro. People in this country were scared stiff about it, but now a lot of people actually think that. Well, a lot of people actually, Nigel. A lot of people. A lot of people think we'd be better off. A lot of people think we'd be better off. They certainly don't.
They don't.
They don't fear it, and people go to other countries and think, well, perhaps we should be part of it. So
that's a debate for another
more
question in the
information.
Euro, by the way.
More information.